My name is Marisa Wilson, and at 67 years old, I never thought I would need to defend my right to exist in my own home. After my son Thomas and his wife Amanda moved in temporarily, what started as family helping family quickly became a power struggle over the house that has been in my family for generations. The day Amanda screamed at me to get up and clean was the day I finally showed her whose name was really on the deed. Before I tell you how my own daughter-in-law tried to kick me out of my family home, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to deal with entitled family members. Life had been relatively peaceful before all this drama started. I had been a widow for 5 years after losing my James to a sudden heart attack. We had been married for 38 wonderful years, and he had always been smart with our finances. He was an accountant after all. When he passed, he left me financially secure with our mortgage, fully paid a decent retirement fund, and some investments that generated enough income for me to live comfortably. I never had to worry about money, which was a blessing at my age. The house itself was special beyond just its financial value. It had been in my family for 4 generations, starting with my great-grandparents who built it in 1930. The colonial-style home sat on 2 acres just outside Richmond, Virginia, with tall oak trees that my grandfather had planted as a young man. Every corner held memories: the living room where my children had opened, Christmas presents, the kitchen where my mother taught me to make her famous apple pie, the garden where James and I spent peaceful evenings watching the sunset, the creaky 3rd step on the staircase, the hand-carved banister, even the slightly uneven floor in the dining room, all told the story of my family. Thomas, my only son, had always been ambitious, but cautious, taking after his father in many ways. He became a financial advisor at a respected firm in Richmond and had been doing well until about 3 years ago, when his company downsized and restructured. He managed to keep his job, but his client base and commission structure were affected significantly. His income dropped by nearly 40%, according to what he told me during one of our Sunday dinners. It was around that difficult time that he met Amanda at a work conference. She was a marketing executive for a competing financial firm, 10 years younger than Thomas at 35, and according to him, brilliantly successful. When he first brought her to dinner, I noticed how she dressed in designer clothes and wore jewelry that seemed expensive for someone their age. She was beautiful, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a way of speaking that commanded attention. Thomas looked at her like she hung the moon. Their romance progressed at lightning speed. Within 4 months of meeting, they were engaged, and 3 months after that, married in a lavish ceremony that seemed excessive to me. I remember questioning Thomas gently about the expense given his financial situation, but he assured me that Amanda had connections that made everything affordable. Looking back now, I should have seen the red flags. What I did not know then, but discovered later, was that they were both carrying significant debt. Amanda had student loans from her MBA program, credit card debt from her lifestyle choices, and Thomas had taken out personal loans to maintain the appearance of success during his career downturn. They had purchased a home they could not truly afford in an upscale neighborhood with a mortgage payment that consumed nearly half their combined income. The inevitable financial crisis hit them last winter. Thomas called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice strained as he explained that they needed to make some temporary changes. Their mortgage had adjusted to a higher rate, Amanda had received a pay cut at work, and they were struggling to make ends meet. He asked somewhat sheepishly if they could move in with me just for a few months, until they got back on their feet. They would rent out their house to cover the mortgage and save on living expenses. I hesitated, I will admit. At 67, I valued my quiet routines and independence. The thought of having 2 additional adults in my space gave me pause. But Thomas was my only child, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. How could I say no? I told him they were welcome to stay as long as they needed, thinking it would truly be just a few months at most. When they first moved in, everything seemed fine. Thomas and Amanda arrived with what they called their essential belongings, though it looked more like half their house to me. Thomas took his old bedroom upstairs, which I had maintained as a guest room, and Amanda seemed appreciative of the space and my hospitality. She even brought me flowers and a thank you card that first week. Amanda cooked dinner several times that first week. Thomas handled some repairs around the house that had been neglected, and we had pleasant evenings watching television together or playing cards. I remember thinking that perhaps this arrangement would work out well for everyone. I enjoyed having company again after years of living alone, and they seemed grateful for the help during their time of need. Looking back now, I realize those pleasant first weeks were just the calm before the storm, a honeymoon period, before Amanda revealed who she truly was and what she really wanted. The shift in Amanda's attitude happened so gradually that at first I questioned whether I was imagining things. About 3 weeks after they moved in, I noticed small criticisms slipping into her conversations. It started innocuously enough, a comment about the living room furniture being outdated, a suggestion that the kitchen could use a more modern organization system, questions about why I kept so many old photographs on display. One morning I came downstairs to find Amanda had completely reorganized my kitchen cabinets. All my dishes, cookware, and pantry items had been rearranged according to what she called a more efficient system. When I mentioned that I had kept things a certain way for decades because it worked for me, she replied, "I was just trying to help Marisa. This kitchen setup was from the 1980s. It was time for an update." Her tone carried an edge of condescension that took me aback. My plates and bowls had been placed on higher shelves that were difficult for me to reach with my arthritis. When I pointed this out, she sighed dramatically and said, "We can move a few things around, but honestly, this is much better for when we entertain." We, as if the house was already theirs. Thomas began spending more and more time at work. He would leave early in the morning and return late at night, often after I had gone to bed. When he was home, he seemed distracted and uncomfortable, particularly when Amanda and I were in the same room. It felt like he was avoiding being caught in the middle of brewing conflict. Then Amanda began inviting her friends over without asking me first. 3 or 4 women would arrive in the afternoon, and they would take over my living room drinking wine and talking loudly. I overheard them one day from the hallway. "This place has such potential," one friend said. "You could knock out that wall and open up the whole downstairs." Amanda laughed. "Believe me, that's the plan. Once we renovate, you won't even recognize it. Just need to get through this awkward phase." Another friend asked, "Is it weird living with your mother-in-law?" "It's challenging," Amanda replied with a sigh. "She's set in her ways, you know how older people get. But this house has been in Thomas' family forever, so eventually it will be ours. We're just speeding up the timeline a bit." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Was that how they viewed their stay here? As some kind of early inheritance claim? When I tried to discuss my concerns with Thomas that weekend, catching him alone in the garage where he was sorting through some boxes, he dismissed my worries. "Mom, it's just a generation gap," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Amanda is used to modern homes and contemporary design. She's just excited about possibilities, that's all. You two are adjusting to each other." "But Thomas," I said carefully, "this is my home. I appreciate help, but not having my things moved without asking or having strangers discuss renovating my house." He sighed, running a hand through his hair the way he did when stressed since he was a little boy. "It's temporary, Mom. Everyone just needs to be flexible until we get back on our feet." But as weeks turned into months, I saw no evidence they were looking for their own place. When I asked Thomas about their timeline one morning, he mumbled something about the rental income from their house being too important right now and changed the subject. Amanda began treating me more like an inconvenient house guest than the homeowner. She would interrupt me when I was watching my favorite programs, claiming she needed the television for an important reality show. She began using my laundry detergent, toiletries, and pantry items without asking or replacing them. The most concerning incident happened when I returned from my weekly bridge game with friends to find Amanda showing her mother around my house, pointing out features they would change. Her mother noticed me first and had the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, Marisa," Amanda said without missing a beat. "I was just showing Mom the house. We were thinking the dining room would make a perfect home office once we convert it, don't you think?" I was speechless. The dining room contained my grandmother's mahogany table and china cabinet pieces that had been in the family since the 19th century. That evening I called my sister Laura, who lived about an hour away, and confided in her about what was happening. "Marisa, this sounds concerning," Laura said. "Have you been clear with them about expectations and timelines?" I thought I had been, but perhaps not clear enough. The problem was, every time I tried to have a serious conversation with Thomas, he was either rushing out the door to work, or Amanda was right there steering the conversation in another direction. By the 2-month mark of their stay, I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable in my own home. I found myself retreating to my bedroom earlier each evening, avoiding confrontation, but also avoiding the spaces in my house that had always brought me joy. My garden went untended for weeks because I didn't want to encounter Amanda on the patio where she had started taking work calls. One afternoon, I discovered several of my knickknacks and small decorative items missing from the living room shelves. When I asked Amanda about them, she casually mentioned she had packed them away in the attic to make room for some of her and Thomas' things. "Those silver frames were my mother's," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. "They were so old-fashioned, though," she replied with a shrug. "Our modern pieces look much better in the space, don't you think?" I noticed she had replaced my family photos with abstract art pieces and decorative objects that meant nothing to me. It felt like she was erasing my family's presence from my own home. The final straw in this early phase came when I discovered Amanda had been going through my mail. I found several opened envelopes in the recycling bin that were addressed to me, including bank statements and correspondence from my lawyer Edward Franklin, who had been a family friend for decades. That evening, I called Edward from my bedroom with the door closed and asked if he could meet me for lunch that week. I needed professional advice about protecting myself and my home, and I trusted his judgment completely. Something wasn't right about Thomas and Amanda's intentions, and a sense of unease was growing stronger each day. My home no longer felt like my sanctuary. It felt like it was being invaded one room at a time. As the 3rd month of Thomas and Amanda's stay began, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Amanda no longer bothered to hide her disdain for the house's historical features or my personal belongings. One evening, while Thomas was working late again, she cornered me in the living room with a binder full of renovation ideas. "Marisa, I've been thinking about how we can bring this place into the 21st century," she said, flipping through pages of modern minimalist designs that bore no resemblance to my traditional colonial home. "The house has character," I responded carefully. "These old homes were built to last with craftsmanship you don't see anymore." "Character is just a nice way of saying outdated," Amanda replied with a dismissive wave. "Look at these open concept designs. We could knock out the wall between the living room and dining room, replace all this dark wood with light maple, and install recessed lighting." My stomach tightened at her use of "we" and her casual suggestion of destroying architectural elements that had stood for nearly a century. "The hardwood floors are original to the house," I said, "and that wall is load-bearing. My grandfather helped build it." Amanda rolled her eyes. "There are solutions for load-bearing walls, and honestly, these creaky floors need to go. Thomas and I were thinking bamboo, or maybe luxury vinyl throughout." I didn't know Thomas had been involved in these discussions. It hurt to think my son was planning major changes to our family home without consulting me. The situation with family heirlooms became another battlefield. My grandmother's antique secretary desk sat in the corner of the living room. It had always been my favorite piece, with its delicate inlay work and secret compartments that fascinated me as a child. "This could fetch a good price at auction," Amanda said one day, running her hand over the desk. "It's taking up space we could use for a media center." "That desk is staying right where it is," I said firmly. "It's been in that corner for 60 years, and will remain there." She gave me a look of thinly veiled irritation. "We need to be practical about what pieces work in a modern lifestyle, Marisa. Thomas agrees that we should select a few sentimental items to keep and find new homes for the rest." I later confronted Thomas about this conversation, but he seemed genuinely confused. "I never said we should sell your furniture, Mom," he insisted, though he added. "But Amanda does have a point about updating some things eventually." That eventually hung in the air between us, loaded with implications. My arthritis had been getting worse that spring, making housework increasingly difficult. I had always kept a tidy home, but now struggled with vacuuming and mopping. Instead of offering help, Amanda began making passive-aggressive comments about the dust on bookshelves or the water spots on bathroom mirrors. "You know, at our house we had a cleaning service come in bi-weekly," she mentioned repeatedly, as if I should hire help for a problem that only existed because 2 additional adults were now living in my space. Thomas began taking Amanda's side more frequently, even in discussions where he previously would have supported me. When I expressed concern about the growing collection of Amanda's decorative items crowding out family photos, Thomas suggested that perhaps it was time to update the look of the house. "Mom, some of these photos are from the 70s, he said. "Maybe we could digitize them and make a nice electronic frame instead of having so many out." It was as if he had forgotten these were pictures of him growing up, of his father, of family vacations and milestone moments. To him, they had become outdated decor items rather than treasured memories. One Saturday, I returned from grocery shopping to find several of my books had been boxed up and moved to the basement. Amanda had replaced them with her collection of self-help and business books and a few decorative objects that matched her aesthetic. "I prefer seeing books that people actually read," she said when I questioned her. "Those old novels were just collecting dust." "I read Jane Austen every year," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "Those books are my friends." She actually laughed at that, as if I had made a joke instead of expressing something meaningful to me. Personal items began to go missing with alarming regularity. My favorite ceramic mug disappeared from the kitchen cabinet. The throw blanket my mother had knitted, which always sat on the back of my reading chair, vanished. When questioned, Amanda would claim ignorance or suggest I had misplaced things due to my age. Without asking, Amanda ordered an expensive new sectional sofa that was delivered one Tuesday afternoon. It was a massive gray thing that dominated the living room and clashed with everything else. "Our old couch was falling apart," she explained, "though my comfortable floral sofa had been in perfect condition, and this one pulls out into a bed for when we have guests." Guests. As if this was her house to invite people to. One evening I overheard Amanda on the phone in the kitchen speaking in low tones. "The place needs a complete overhaul," she was saying, "but once it's ours we can really make it shine, the property value alone in this neighborhood." "I know, right? We'd be crazy not to. It's just a matter of time." A chill ran through me. I had been trying to give Thomas and Amanda the benefit of the doubt, but that conversation confirmed my worst fears. They weren't planning to move out. They were waiting to take over. The next day, I had lunch with my friend Edward, the lawyer. We had known each other since high school, and his late wife had been one of my closest friends. Over soup and sandwiches at a quiet cafe, I poured out the whole situation. "So they haven't given any indication of when they plan to leave?" Edward asked, his bushy gray eyebrows drawing together in concern. "None," I replied. "And Amanda keeps talking about renovations and their plans for the house, as if they already own it. Edward, I'm afraid they're waiting for me to not be around anymore." Edward put down his spoon and gave me a serious look. "Marisa, who is named in your will regarding the house." I hadn't updated my will since James died. It simply stated that all my assets, including the house, would go to Thomas. "We need to make some changes," Edward said. "Not to disinherit Thomas, but to protect you while you're very much alive and well." That afternoon we went to his office and drew up new documents. I didn't want to cut Thomas out completely, but I needed to ensure that my home remained mine for as long as I lived. When I returned home that evening, Amanda was giving a tour to a young woman she introduced as an interior designer friend, just dropping by to offer some suggestions. I smiled tightly and excused myself to my room, listening as they discussed wall colors and flooring options for a renovation that would never happen with my permission. The breaking point was approaching, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came to a head. My 67th birthday fell on a beautiful Saturday in May. I had always kept my birthdays simple, preferring small gatherings with close friends and family over large celebrations. This year I had invited my sister Laura and her husband, my dear friend Patricia, who lived next door, and of course Thomas and Amanda would be there since they were living with me. I spent the morning baking my mother's recipe for lemon cake, a birthday tradition I had maintained for decades. The familiar process of measuring flour, creaming butter and sugar, and grating lemon zest was soothing, bringing back memories of birthdays past, when James would sneak tastes of batter and Thomas would help decorate with slightly wobbly, frosting designs as a child. Amanda walked into the kitchen as I was putting the finishing touches on the cake, dressed in workout clothes and carrying her phone. "Oh, you're baking," she remarked, glancing at the cake with a slightly curled lip. "You know Thomas and I could have ordered something from that gourmet bakery downtown. Their sugar-free, gluten-free options are amazing." "I've been making this cake for 40 years, I replied. "It's a family tradition." "Well, traditions can change," she said with a shrug. "Anyway, I've made dinner reservations for 7 o'clock at Castellani's." I paused, spatula in hand. I hadn't been consulted about dinner plans and had already prepared a small roast to serve after my guests arrived at 4. "I'm sorry, but I've already planned dinner here," I explained. "Laura and Robert are coming at 4 along with Patricia from next door." Amanda sighed dramatically. "Castellani's has a 3-month waiting list, Marisa. I pulled strings to get this reservation for your birthday. Thomas already agreed it would be nice to take you somewhere special." Again, decisions being made about my birthday without my input. I felt my patience wearing thin. "Thank you for the thought, but I would prefer to stick with my original plans," I said firmly. "My sister is bringing her famous deviled eggs, and Patricia hasn't been feeling well enough to go to restaurants lately." Amanda's expression hardened. "Fine, I'll cancel. But you really should have communicated better about what you wanted to do today." The irony of her statement was not lost on me. The small gathering started pleasantly enough. Laura arrived with her husband Robert bearing gifts and her famous deviled eggs as promised. Patricia came over with a beautiful orchid plant and a warm hug. Thomas seemed distracted, but made an effort to be present, bringing out old photo albums and reminiscing about family stories. Amanda, however, made her displeasure known in subtle ways throughout the afternoon. She checked her phone constantly, sighed loudly during conversations that didn't include her, and made several comments about the simplicity of the gathering. "This is so quaint," she remarked as we sat down to dinner. "In my family, we always celebrated birthdays at upscale restaurants. There's a certain elegance to letting professionals handle everything." Laura, never one to let rudeness slide, raised an eyebrow. "There's also something special about home-cooked meals made with love, wouldn't you agree? Marisa has always been an excellent cook." Amanda merely smiled tightly and turned her attention to her phone again. When it came time for cake and gifts, Amanda's behavior took a sharper turn. As I unwrapped Laura's gift, a beautiful hand-knitted shawl in my favorite blue, Amanda muttered just loudly enough to be heard, "More stuff to clutter the house." Thomas shot her a warning glance, but she ignored it. Patricia had gifted me a set of gardening tools, with cushioned handles, that would be easier on my arthritic hands. A thoughtful present that brought tears to my eyes. "These are perfect, Patricia," I said warmly. "You know how much I miss working in my garden." "Well," Amanda interrupted, "that garden is so old-fashioned with all those perennials. We were thinking of redesigning it with a more modern Zen aesthetic. Low maintenance, you know." I hadn't discussed garden changes with anyone. Laura put down her fork and gave Amanda a direct look. "Amanda dear, I'm curious. When you say we are thinking of changing things, who exactly are you referring to?" The room fell silent. Thomas suddenly became very interested in his cake. "Thomas and I, of course," Amanda replied smoothly. "We've been discussing ways to update the property to better reflect contemporary tastes." "How interesting," Laura continued, her voice deceptively light. "I wasn't aware my sister had asked for landscaping advice." Amanda's cheeks flushed slightly. "Well, we live here too. We should have some input on the space." "Temporarily," Laura reminded her. "You live here temporarily, as I understand it." The tension in the room was palpable. Thomas cleared his throat and quickly changed the subject to safer territory, asking Robert about his recent fishing trip. The moment passed, but the damage was done. My birthday celebration had been tainted by the clear evidence that Amanda saw my home as hers to change at will. After my guests left, Thomas mumbled an excuse about needing to catch up on work and disappeared upstairs. Amanda didn't bother with excuses, simply grabbing her purse and announcing she was meeting friends for drinks. I was left alone to clean up after my own birthday dinner, my heart heavy with the realization that things couldn't continue this way. In the weeks that followed, Thomas worked increasingly long hours. He would leave before I woke up and return after I'd gone to bed. When I did see him, he seemed stressed and distracted, often avoiding eye contact. Our once close relationship had deteriorated to brief, awkward encounters in our own home. One Tuesday afternoon, Amanda invited her parents over, without telling me in advance. I came downstairs from a nap to find strangers sitting in my living room, drinks in hand, looking critically at my home. "Mom, Dad, this is Thomas's mother, Marisa," Amanda introduced breezily. "Marisa, these are my parents, Harold and Judith." I managed a polite greeting, though I was uncomfortable being caught in loungewear in my own home due to their unannounced visit. "Beautiful bones to this place," Harold commented, looking around. "Amanda tells us you're considering some major renovations soon." Before I could correct this assumption, Amanda jumped in. "We're thinking of opening up the entire downstairs, modernizing the kitchen, maybe adding a master suite on the main level." Her father nodded approvingly. "Smart move. These old houses need updating to maintain their value. Have you considered how you'll finance the renovations?" Again, Amanda answered before I could speak. "We have some ideas. Once everything is settled, we'll have options." The implication was clear, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Once everything is settled, once I was out of the picture, perhaps. After they left, I confronted Amanda directly. "Those renovation plans you discussed with your parents," I said carefully. "I haven't agreed to any of that." She waved a dismissive hand. "It's just ideas at this point, Marisa. But honestly, this place needs a complete overhaul to be livable by modern standards." "It's perfectly livable now, and has been, for 4 generations of my family," I countered. She gave me a patronizing smile. "Times change. You can't expect Thomas to live in a museum when this eventually becomes his home." There it was again, the assumption that my death would conveniently transfer ownership to them soon. The next disturbing discovery came through my neighbor Patricia. She called me one afternoon, her voice concerned. "Marisa, I ran into Amanda at the grocery store yesterday," she said. "She was telling everyone that you've been having memory issues and that she and Thomas moved in to take care of you. Is that true?" I was stunned. "Absolutely not," I replied. "My memory is perfectly fine, and they moved in because of their financial problems, not to care for me." "I thought that sounded odd," Patricia said. "She made it seem like you were quite dependent on them. Several people from the neighborhood have asked me about your health since then." The story Amanda was spinning to our community made my blood boil. She was positioning herself as a caring daughter-in-law, looking after an elderly relative rather than what she truly was, someone taking advantage of family generosity. Concerned about their true financial situation, I began quietly investigating. Thomas had mentioned they were renting out their house, but I realized I'd never heard any details about tenants or rental income. When Thomas left his laptop open on the kitchen table one evening, I took the opportunity to glance at his email. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. There were numerous messages from their mortgage company regarding missed payments and possible foreclosure. Their house wasn't being rented out at all, they simply couldn't afford the payments and had abandoned it to the bank. There were also emails from credit card companies about overdue balances and collection notices. Thomas and Amanda were in much deeper financial trouble than they had admitted. It wasn't a temporary setback, it appeared they were on the verge of bankruptcy. The final straw came on a Wednesday when I returned early from my doctor's appointment for my arthritis. I had been prescribed a new medication and was advised to rest for the remainder of the day. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked out front. Inside, I found Amanda leading a man and woman through my house. They had measuring tapes and were taking notes on tablets. "The kitchen will be completely gutted, of course," Amanda was saying. "We'll take down this wall, install an island with waterfall countertops, and replace all the appliances with professional-grade stainless." "Excuse me," I interrupted, still standing in the doorway. "What's going on here?" Amanda looked startled for a moment, but quickly recovered. "Oh, Marisa, you're home early. These are interior designers I've been consulting with about updating the house." The male designer extended his hand. Amanda has told us so much about this project. You must be excited about the renovations. There won't be any renovations, I said firmly. I'm not planning to change anything about my home. An awkward silence fell over the room. The designers glanced between Amanda and me, clearly confused. Perhaps there's been a miscommunication, the woman suggested diplomatically. We understood this was a firm project with a fall start date. I'm sorry you've been misled, I replied. This is my home, and I have not approved any design projects or renovations. Amanda's face flushed with anger. The designers quickly made their excuses and left, promising to follow up with Amanda later. Once we were alone, Amanda didn't even attempt to explain or apologize. Instead, she went on the offensive. You're being ridiculous, Marisa, she snapped. This house is stuck in the 1970s. Thomas will inherit it eventually anyway, so why not make improvements now that we can all enjoy? The callousness of her statement left me speechless. She was talking about renovating my home while I was still very much alive, based on an inheritance she assumed would be coming soon. That evening, I called Edward again and scheduled another meeting. The next morning, I spent 2 hours in his office, updating my will and putting additional legal protections in place. Edward also helped me draft a formal written agreement regarding Thomas and Amanda's temporary residence in my home, including an exit date 3 months in the future. When I returned home, I overheard Amanda on the phone in the backyard, not realizing I had returned. It's taking forever, she was saying to someone. The old lady is surprisingly stubborn about the house, but don't worry, once she's gone we'll have the property and can sell it for a fortune. In this neighborhood, even a teardown would fetch 7 figures. My hands trembled as I quietly closed the door. The mask had finally dropped completely. Amanda wasn't just waiting for me to die naturally. She was actively counting on my death as part of her financial planning. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed, the new legal documents in my purse, feeling like both a shield and a sword. The confrontation was inevitable now. It was just a matter of when and how it would unfold. The day everything came to a head started like any other. It was a Friday in June, unusually hot and humid for Virginia that time of year. I had a morning appointment with my rheumatologist to discuss my worsening arthritis pain. The doctor had adjusted my medication and recommended rest for the remainder of the day, as the new prescription might cause some initial dizziness. I returned home around 11:30, feeling drained from both the heat and the doctor's visit. The house was empty, as Thomas was at work, and Amanda had mentioned something about a job interview that morning, though I had my doubts about whether she was actually looking for employment. I settled into my favorite armchair in the living room with a glass of iced tea, intending to rest as the doctor suggested. My joints were particularly painful that day, and the simple act of climbing the porch steps had left me wincing. I took my new medication and closed my eyes, hoping for some relief. The house wasn't in its usual pristine condition. I had been unable to do my regular cleaning routine for several days due to pain, and it showed in the light layer of dust on the coffee table and the unvacuumed carpet. Thomas and Amanda, despite living there, rent-free for months, rarely contributed to household chores, unless specifically asked, and even then, their efforts were half-hearted at best. I must have dozed off because the sound of the front door slamming jolted me awake. Heavy footsteps stormed through the foyer, and Amanda appeared in the living room doorway. Her face was flushed, her designer outfit slightly wilted from the heat, and her expression thunderous. That interview was a complete waste of time, she announced without greeting. They wanted 5 years of marketing experience in their specific industry. How ridiculous is that? I straightened in my chair, still groggy from my nap. I'm sorry to hear it didn't go well, I offered. Amanda paced the room, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. They offered me an entry-level position. Me. With my MBA and executive experience, the salary was insulting. She stopped abruptly, looking around the living room, as if seeing it for the first time that day. The place looked lived in, certainly, but was far from what anyone would consider truly messy. God, this place is a disaster, she muttered, dropping her designer purse on the sofa. Don't you ever clean anymore? The question stung particularly, since she had contributed nothing to the upkeep of the house. I have been having trouble with my arthritis this week, I explained. The doctor adjusted my medication today. Amanda rolled her eyes. There's always something, isn't there? She stalked to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water, continuing to survey the room with obvious disapproval. A small pile of mail sat unopened on the side table, a throw blanket was unfolded on the couch, and my morning teacup sat empty beside my chair. You know, when my mother was your age, she was still running 5 miles every morning and maintaining a spotless home, Amanda said pointedly. She never used her age as an excuse. I felt a flash of indignation. Everyone ages differently, Amanda. And your mother isn't struggling with arthritis, I assume. She scoffed. My mother believes in pushing through discomfort, mind over matter. The conversation was taking an unpleasant turn, as they often did with Amanda lately. I decided to change the subject. Did the interviewer give you any feedback that might be helpful for other opportunities? This was apparently the wrong question. Amanda's face darkened further. I don't need feedback, she snapped. I need people to recognize my value. It's not my fault the job market is impossible right now. She picked up a decorative pillow and punched it back into shape with unnecessary force. Meanwhile, we're stuck living in this outdated museum because Thomas can't get his act together and increase his client base. I felt defensive on my son's behalf, even though I had my own concerns about his career choices lately. Thomas is doing his best during a difficult time, I said. The financial industry has been volatile. His best isn't good enough, Amanda retorted. We should be living in our own home, not sharing space with. She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Not sharing space with an elderly woman they saw as a burden. I shifted in my chair, trying to find a position that eased the pain in my hips. The new medication was making me slightly nauseated, and I wasn't feeling equipped for this confrontation. Perhaps you could help tidy up a bit since you're home now, I suggested gently. We could get the living room sorted together. It was as if Id lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Amanda whirled on me, her eyes flashing with sudden rage. Are you kidding me? She nearly shouted. I just spent 3 hours in a humiliating interview, and now you want me to be your maid. I was taken aback by the intensity of her reaction. That's not what I meant. I just thought, get up and clean this house. Amanda screamed, her composure completely gone. You're useless. You sit around all day doing nothing while Thomas and I are trying to build a future. This house is a reflection of all of us now, not just you. I sat frozen in my chair, shocked by her outburst. In 67 years, no one had ever spoken to me that way in my own home. You contribute nothing, she continued, her voice still raised. You're just taking up space and expecting everyone to cater to you because you're old. Well, newsflash. Marisa, being elderly, isn't a free pass to be lazy. I heard the front door open amid her tirade, and Thomas appeared in the doorway, briefcase in hand, eyes wide as he took in the scene before him. His wife, standing over his mother's face, contorted in anger while I sat speechless in my chair. What's going on? He asked, his voice tense. Your mother is what's going on, Amanda spat. She wants me to clean the house after she's sat around all day doing nothing. The place is a pigsty because she refuses to keep up with basic housework. Thomas looked around the room, clearly seeing that it was nowhere near as bad as Amanda was describing. He set down his briefcase and loosened his tie, his expression uncomfortable. Mom's been having trouble with her arthritis, Amanda, he said quietly. You know that. Oh, so you're taking her side, Amanda demanded. What about everything I do around here? I'm the one who's been updating this place, making it livable, planning for our future. I expected Thomas to defend me more vigorously, to point out that Amanda had done nothing but criticize and attempt to change my home since arriving. Instead, he sighed heavily and said, Let's all just calm down. It's been a long day for everyone. His attempt at neutrality felt like a betrayal. This was the moment I knew I had to stand up for myself, or risk losing not just my home but my dignity. I rose slowly from my chair, my joints protesting but my resolve firm. I looked directly at Amanda, then at my son. I think I said calmly, we need to have a long overdue conversation about this house and your living arrangement here. Amanda crossed her arms defensively, finally admitting, you need help maintaining this place. No, I replied, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. I'm clarifying who owns this house and what that means for all of us. The living room fell silent after my statement. Amanda's expression shifted from anger to confusion, while Thomas looked suddenly wary, as if he sensed what was coming. "Give me a moment," I said, walking carefully past them toward my bedroom. In my closet behind my winter sweaters was a small, fireproof safe that had belonged to my husband. I unlocked it and retrieved a folder containing important documents: the deed to the house, my updated will, and the residence agreement Edward had prepared. When I returned to the living room, Thomas had sat down on the sofa, but Amanda remained standing, her arms still crossed defensively. I placed the folder on the coffee table and took a seat in my chair again. My heart was pounding, but my voice remained steady as I began. "This house has been in my family for 4 generations," I said, opening the folder. "My great-grandparents built it in 1930. My grandfather added the east wing in the 50s. My parents raised me here, and James and I raised Thomas here." I removed the deed and placed it on the table. "This is the current deed to the property. As you can see, it is solely in my name, since James passed 5 years ago." Amanda glanced at the document, but remained silent, her jaw tense. "When you asked to move in temporarily, I welcomed you because family helps family in times of need. But it's become clear that your understanding of temporary differs significantly from mine." Thomas shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Mom, we're still getting back on our feet financially. These things take time." "I understand that, Thomas. But what I don't understand is why Amanda has been making plans to renovate my home, telling neighbors I'm suffering from memory issues, bringing in interior designers, and discussing what will happen to this property once I'm gone." Thomas's head snapped toward Amanda, genuine surprise on his face. "What is she talking about?" Amanda's cheeks flushed. "Your mother is exaggerating. I was just exploring possibilities for the future." "The future where you sell this house for 7 figures after I die?" I asked quietly. "I overheard your phone conversation, Amanda." The color drained from her face. Thomas looked between us, confused and increasingly distressed. "Mom, no one is planning to sell the house," he insisted. I removed the next document from my folder, my newly updated will. "Until last week, my will stated that upon my death, this house and all my assets would pass directly to you, Thomas. That has changed." Now I had both their full attention. "After consulting with Edward Franklin, I've established a family trust. Upon my death, the house will be held in trust for 10 years before any decisions can be made about its future. The trust specifies that the house cannot be sold during that period, and any renovations must be approved by the trustees, who include your aunt, Laura, and Edward." Amanda's face had gone from flushed to pale. "You can't do that," she whispered. "I can, and I have," I replied calmly. "Additionally, I've drafted a formal residence agreement." I slid the third document forward. "It stipulates the terms of your continued stay in my home, including a move-out date of September 1st, 3 months from now." Thomas picked up the agreement, scanning it with widening eyes. "Mom, this isn't necessary. We're family." "Family respects each other," I countered. "Family doesn't make renovation plans without the homeowner's consent. Family doesn't lie to neighbors about my mental capacity. Family doesn't wait for me to die to claim their inheritance." Thomas looked genuinely pained. I wouldn't." "Did you know your house is in foreclosure?" "Thomas," I asked softly. "Did you know Amanda has been interviewing interior designers and telling them you'll be gutting this house in the fall?" Thomas turned to Amanda, his expression a mixture of confusion and betrayal. "Our house is in foreclosure. Why didn't you tell me?" Amanda's composure finally cracked. "Because you never want to face reality. Your career is stagnant. We're drowning in debt, and you do nothing but work those pathetic accounts that barely pay our credit card minimums." Thomas looked like he'd been slapped. "I've been working 60-hour weeks trying to rebuild my client base. While I've been stuck in this museum with your mother watching my career opportunities vanish." Amanda shot back. I let them argue for a moment before gently tapping the residence agreement. "This document gives you both 3 months to find alternative housing and get your financial affairs in order. During that time, you'll contribute $500 monthly toward household expenses." Amanda let out a bitter laugh. We don't have $500 to spare. That's why we're here. Then perhaps it's time to make some difficult decisions about your lifestyle and priorities, I replied. The designer handbags, the salon visits, the expensive dinners out with friends. These are luxuries you can't afford right now. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, looking overwhelmed. Mom, please. Can we discuss this reasonably? We can make changes, be more respectful of your space. I softened slightly at my son's distress. Thomas, I love you. You will always be my son. But this situation has become untenable. Amanda has made it clear she views this house as her future asset, not my current home. I turned to Amanda. This house represents my family's history and my security. It is not your bailout plan for poor financial decisions. It is not yours to redesign, renovate, or plan to sell. Amanda's face hardened again. So you'd put your own son on the street. What kind of mother does that? I'm not putting anyone on the street, I replied firmly. I'm giving you 3 months' notice and a clear boundary. What you do with that time is up to you. Thomas looked at the papers again, then at me with dawning realization. You're serious about this? I am, I confirmed. I've also spoken with Edward about your financial situation. He's willing to meet with both of you to discuss debt consolidation options and create a realistic budget. That offer stands regardless of whether you sign this agreement. Amanda grabbed her purse from the sofa. This is ridiculous. I need some air. She stormed out of the house, the front door slamming behind her. Thomas and I sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and revelation. She told me she was handling our finances, he said quietly. I had no idea about the foreclosure. I knew we were behind, but not that far. You've been avoiding the hard conversations, Thomas, I said gently. With Amanda and with me. He nodded slowly. I didn't want to be caught in the middle, but that's exactly where I put myself, isn't it? You did, I agreed. And you've allowed Amanda to disrespect me and my home in ways I never thought you would permit. Thomas hung his head. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. Amanda kept saying you were just resistant to change, that you'd come around to her ideas eventually. This isn't about being resistant to change, I explained. It's about respect and boundaries. This is my home, Thomas. Not a way station until I die, and you inherit. My son looked up, genuine remorse in his eyes. What can I do to make this right? I pushed the residence agreement toward him. Start by signing this. Then have an honest conversation with Amanda about your finances and your future plans. And perhaps most importantly, decide what kind of man you want to be, one who honors his family's values or one who abandons them for a lifestyle he can't afford. Thomas picked up the pen I had placed beside the documents and signed the agreement without further hesitation. I'll talk to Amanda when she calms down, and I'll call Edward tomorrow about our finances. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I had reclaimed my home and my dignity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy for any of us, but at least now we were dealing with reality instead of illusions and schemes. Thank you for being my son, I said softly, even when it's difficult. Thomas managed a small smile. Thank you for being strong enough to tell me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. As evening fell, Amanda returned to the house subdued but still angry. She refused to sign the agreement that night, but Thomas's signature was enough to make it binding. The balance of power had shifted, and we all knew it. My house would remain my home on my terms for as long as I lived. The days following our confrontation were tense but transformative. Amanda remained cold and distant, spending as little time as possible at the house. She would leave early in the morning and return late, barely acknowledging my presence. When forced to speak to me, her words were clipped and formal, stripped of the false sweetness she had occasionally mustered before. Thomas, on the other hand, seemed to undergo a genuine transformation. The day after signing the residence agreement, he called Edward as promised and scheduled a meeting to discuss their financial situation. He came home that evening with a stack of financial documents he had gathered from their house, which was indeed in the early stages of foreclosure. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he spread the papers across the table, running his hands through his hair in distress. "This is so much worse than I realized, Mom," he confessed. "We've been living completely beyond our means for years." I sat down beside him, looking at the mountain of debt they'd accumulated: credit card statements, showing balances of tens of thousands of dollars, the mortgage documents with missed payment notices, personal loans, and Amanda's student loans. "How did it get this bad?" I asked gently. Thomas sighed. "It started small. Amanda had a certain lifestyle she wanted to maintain. The right neighborhood, the right car, the right clothes. I wanted to make her happy. Then when my income dropped, instead of cutting back, we just started putting more on credit. We both kept thinking things would turn around soon." "Did Amanda know how serious it was?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "She knew. She was the one who suggested we stop opening the mortgage notices. She said we'd figure something out before it got too serious. I think she was counting on inheriting this house sooner rather than later." The admission hung heavy between us. My son had married a woman who saw my death as a financial strategy. The meeting with Edward was a wake-up call for Thomas. Edward laid out their options in stark terms: bankruptcy, aggressive debt consolidation, or continuing on a path to complete financial ruin. Thomas chose to pursue debt consolidation, though it would require significant lifestyle changes and years of disciplined financial management. Amanda refused to attend the meeting with Edward or participate in the financial planning discussions. When Thomas presented her with their new budget, which eliminated all luxuries and required her to find employment immediately, she exploded in anger. "This is not the life I signed up for," I heard her shouting from their bedroom upstairs. "I am not living like some poverty-stricken college student. I cannot continue paying for designer handbags while we're about to lose our house." Thomas responded, his voice firm, in a way I hadn't heard in years. "We need to grow up and face reality." Their argument continued for hours, that night ending only when Amanda stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. She didn't return until the following afternoon, red-eyed and subdued. A week after our confrontation, Thomas suggested we all attend family therapy. To my surprise, Amanda agreed, though I suspected it was more to save her marriage than to repair her relationship with me. The therapist, Dr. Leanne Carter, was a compassionate woman in her 50s who specialized in family dynamics and intergenerational conflicts. In our first session, she created a safe space for each of us to express our feelings without interruption or accusation. "I feel like my independence and autonomy have been disrespected in my own home," I explained when it was my turn. "This house represents not just financial security, but my family history and identity." Thomas spoke of feeling caught between loyalty to his mother and his wife, of shame over his financial failures and fear about the future. When it was Amanda's turn, she surprised me with her honesty, if not her empathy. "I feel trapped in a life that's falling apart," she said. "I married Thomas believing we'd have a certain lifestyle. Now we're living with his mother, drowning in debt, and facing a future that looks nothing like what I envisioned. I'm angry and scared." Over the following weeks, Dr. Carter helped us identify patterns of communication and expectations that had led to our conflict. She guided Thomas in setting boundaries with both Amanda and me, helped Amanda confront her materialism and entitlement, and supported me in maintaining my authority over my home while still being compassionate toward their struggles. It wasn't an easy process. There were sessions where Amanda stormed out, others where Thomas broke down in tears, and some where I had to confront my own enabling behaviors that had contributed to the situation. Meanwhile, the 3-month deadline approached. Thomas had secured a second job working weekend shifts at a financial advisory call center to supplement his regular income. He had also been meeting with a career coach to improve his client acquisition strategies. Amanda, after several more failed interviews for executive positions, finally accepted a mid-level marketing job at a local firm. It paid significantly less than her previous position, but it was steady income they desperately needed. She complained bitterly about the step backward in her career, but recognized she had no choice given their financial situation. Thomas and Amanda found a small 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. It was nothing like their previous home, with no granite countertops or walk-in closets, but it was clean, safe, and within their new budget. They signed a lease scheduled to begin on August 15th, 2 weeks before their deadline to move out of my house. As the moving date approached, I noticed a subtle shift in Amanda's demeanor. The open hostility had faded, replaced by a quieter, more reflective attitude. She was still distant, but occasionally I would catch her looking at family photos or sitting in the garden with a thoughtful expression. One evening, about a week before they were set to move, Amanda approached me as I was reading in the living room. She sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I owe you an apology, Marisa," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I haven't treated you or your home with respect." I set my book aside, surprised by this unexpected olive branch. "Thank you for saying that, Amanda." She looked around the living room at the antique furniture and family photos she'd once dismissed as outdated. I was so focused on the life I thought I deserved that I couldn't see the value in what was already here. This house, it's not just a building or an asset, it's your family history. "It is," I agreed simply. "My parents always taught me that success meant having the newest and best of everything," she continued. "I never learned to appreciate things with history or meaning." It wasn't a complete transformation. Amanda was still Amanda, fundamentally concerned with appearances and status. But it was a moment of genuine self-reflection I hadn't thought her capable of. On moving day, Thomas hugged me tightly before carrying the last box to their car. "Thank you for the wake-up call, Mom," he said. "It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." I held his face in my hands, this grown man, who would always be my little boy in some corner of my heart. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, not just giving everything away. He nodded, understanding, finally reaching his eyes. "Well, visit every Sunday for dinner if that's all right with you." "I'd like that very much," I replied. Amanda and I exchanged a civil goodbye, not warm, but no longer hostile. There was a long road ahead for all of us, particularly for her and Thomas, as they rebuilt their financial life and worked on their marriage. But the first steps had been taken. After they left, I walked through my quiet house, touching familiar surfaces, feeling the weight of generations in the well-worn banister and creaky floorboards. For the first time in months, I felt at peace in my own home again. I called my sister Laura that evening to share the news that Thomas and Amanda had moved out peacefully. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Lighter," I replied honestly, "and stronger than I knew I could be." "You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to give in," she observed. "That's no small thing at any age." In the months that followed, I reconnected with friends I'd withdrawn from during the difficult period with Thomas and Amanda. I resumed my garden club activities, and bridge games, started taking a gentle yoga class for seniors at the community center, and even began volunteering at the local elementary school as a reading tutor. Thomas and Amanda did come for Sunday dinners, though not every week. Their relationship remained complicated both with each other and with me, but there was a new foundation of honesty and respect that hadn't existed before. The experience taught me that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. For too long, I'd confused loving my son with giving him whatever he wanted or needed, even at my own expense. It enabled patterns that weren't healthy for any of us. Standing up for myself didn't mean I loved Thomas any less. In fact, it gave him the opportunity to become a stronger, more responsible man. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is to require them to face reality even when it's painful. As for Amanda, I don't know if she'll ever truly change her materialistic values, but at least she now understands that my home and my dignity are not commodities to be bartered or taken. Whatever relationship we build moving forward will be based on mutual respect, not manipulation or entitlement. The family home will remain in the trust I established, preserving our history and legacy for future generations. Whether Thomas and Amanda ever live here again will depend on how they demonstrate their understanding of what this house truly means, not just what it's worth in dollars and cents. Life is too short and too precious to spend it being disrespected in your own home. Age brings wisdom, not obsolescence. Never let anyone make you feel useless or burdensome, especially not in the spaces you have created and maintained with love over a lifetime. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and personal growth. Remember to share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength and worth. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always find peace and dignity in your own home.